from the 23rd District of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not really sure what point that previous exchange was attempting to prove, but constitutional rights for guns are for another committee's jurisdiction, not this one. That having been said, Ms. Chapman, it's good to see you. I wanted to ask you if you support making Election Day a federal holiday. There's legislation that our colleague Congresswoman Anna Eshoo has introduced called the Election Day Holiday Act of 2019. And I wanted to see if you support that legislation and if you believe it would increase voter turnout and participation.
Yes, the Leadership Conference supports making Election Day a federal holiday. We believe it will create more opportunities for people to vote. Working people, people who might not be able to take time off, who might have childcare or transportation hurdles, we definitely support that. And we support any reform that would expand the franchise.
Great. Absentee voting is really a necessary option for so many Americans today, especially because we want to make sure we can provide that access to as many people as possible. But, representing the state of Florida, especially for older and disabled voters, as well as brave service members who are stationed overseas, a lot of those are Floridians as well. It can be a gateway to the ballot box, but we also have work to do to make it a reliable option for voters. Many jurisdictions require voters to pay postage, for example, before returning their ballots, or worse, do not clearly indicate whether postage is required. Voting should be free, period. When it costs a voter money to cast or return their ballot, whether it's paying a fee for ID or paying for postage to mail their ballot, it's tantamount to a poll tax. And so I'm proud that my county, my home county, Broward County, covers the cost of all postage for absentee ballot returns, as well as, obviously, the cost of it being mailed to the voter. And I think this needs to be a universal practice. So, Ms. Chapman, do you support requiring localities to provide absentee ballots with prepaid postage? And are you aware of the impact that prepaying postage has on absentee ballot returns and turnout?
Yes, I definitely support the prepaid postage. I actually worked as an advocate on the ground in Florida and saw how, there are a lot of times ballots can be very extensive because of the amendments on the ballot, and postage can also be very expensive. So I believe that, elections should be free, fair, and accessible, that we should not place additional costs on voters. I don't have statistics on exactly what that looks like around the country, but I believe to the extent possible that voters should not have to bear those costs.
Okay, and I'll ask you the other two questions in succession rapidly, so you can just answer them and take us home for the rest of my time. Signature verification. In the 2018 election in Florida in particular, I'm concerned that our flawed signature verification system in our state chipped away at the fundamental right to vote. We've had numerous articles that described minorities and young voters suffering discrimination because they had a higher likelihood of signature rejection. Technological changes, including the frequency of touchpad signatures, the use of that, the fact that cursive writing is really no longer taught in many schools, that makes signatures less reliable for a quick verification of a person's identity. And we know that signatures change as people age, become ill, fall out of practice, or are simply in a rush. In fact, businesses like Target and Walmart have stopped using signatures entirely to verify transactions from their 4 largest credit card networks. So my first question is, because it still is the main way that they identify voters in Florida, either Ms. Chapman or Mr. Ho, what do you think about the signature verification requirement in Florida and other states? Is it time to abandon that requirement? Is there an improved verification process that would be better? And then also, deadline for submission of absentee ballots. There is not a uniform deadline for submission of absentee ballots. In fact, in Florida, you have to have your absentee ballot turned in a full 24 hours before the election day even commences. And so, we want to make sure, I think, that we can have every vote counted, and there doesn't appear to me to be a rush to ensure that the votes are received on Election Day, but are at least postmarked by Election Day. So should there be a uniform policy that allows voters to have their vote-by-mail ballots count as long as they are postmarked by Election Day, and also drop-off policies that allow for drop-offs to be done at a polling site? Those are my questions.
I can address the issue of the signature matches since the ACLU has done some litigation over that. I think, we haven't taken the position that states should abandon signature matching altogether, but because of the reasons that you've identified, what we think is critical is that if an elections worker flags someone for a perceived signature mismatch, and remember, elections workers, they're not like FBI-trained handwriting analysts or something like that. They're eyeballing something,
Right.
and people's signatures do change over time, and all the issues you identified. It's just important that voters receive notice and an opportunity to say, hey, you made a mistake. That's me. That's my ballot. Don't throw away my vote before doing so. And actually what we've seen in a number of states is that no such opportunity or notice is given. Ballots are simply tossed based on a perceived signature mismatch. And we think that's a really key problem that needs to be addressed.
And can Ms. Chapman answer the other half of my question?
Yeah, please, the witness may answer the question.
Sure, yes, we believe that every voter should have an opportunity to cast their ballot and have it counted. So that includes extending opportunities for absentee ballot, for voters to be able to turn in those absentee ballots. So I know states that have all-mail voting, like for instance, Washington State, they have ample drop-off boxes. I think that's a best practice that that we can adopt around the country. So absentee ballots can be turned in closer to Election Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.